Let's talk about depression and fibromyalgia today. So we'll talk about depression, depressive feelings, how it relates to fibromyalgia, what you can do and what other fibro folks have done to help lift their depression, as well as preparing yourself for what will be potentially a longer journey. All right, so let's get into it. Welcome to Fibro Pulse. I'm Linda, and today we're talking about a very difficult but extremely important topic, depression and fibromyalgia. But before we get into it, I would like to just thank everyone for being here and participating. These discussions are much more rich with the more voices we have. So thank you for being here. And if you were not able to join us live for this discussion, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter or hit subscribe here on YouTube and ring the little bell. Then you'll get notified when we do go live. Also, if you follow us on social media, we'll post it there to give you reminders. And all of that just really helps to support our project and this channel. So thank you so much. All right, let's get into it. So we can go to the PowerPoint. Okay. So just starting, let's talk about what depression is. So we can go to the girl. Okay. So there's a difference between depressive feelings and what's defined as clinical depression. So we talk about this in our article a bit. So if you, we posted an article about this this previous week. So go there to check out some more details. But essentially, everyone gets depressive feelings from time to time, but clinical depression is defined by 3 months or more of depressed feelings that really don't lift. It can also be called major depressive disorder. Clinical depression, in particular, is very common within the fibro community. So it's not just feeling down from time to time. It's persistently having feelings of flattened mood, worthlessness, or guilt. And you have to, in order to be diagnosed with clinical depression, you have to have been feeling this way for 3 months or more. So on top of, or in conjunction with just those depressed, the depressed feelings, depression can also have related symptoms, including erratic emotions, disordered eating, both under eating or overeating, loss of interest in activities that you normally enjoyed and derive pleasure from, anxiety, trouble thinking and concentrating, like the fibro fog type stuff, also applies to depression, and potentially suicidal thoughts. If you're having suicidal thoughts, make sure to reach out to someone, call a hotline in your area, because there's lots of options for help out there, and some of them can be quite immediate. So have you struggled with depressive feelings? I know I have. And back when I first was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, it was incredibly difficult. That more persistent type clinical depression, the cloud that just hangs over you all the time. And I feel like we'll get into talking about fibromyalgia in a minute, but a lot of us have that experience, especially in the beginning. So let's talk about that. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so how does this relate to fibromyalgia? Interestingly enough, there's a lot of overlap in the symptoms in general. So some of the symptoms of fibromyalgia are also symptoms of depression. On top of that, or, kind of logically thinking, the physical pain being in physical pain all the time can logically lead to depressive feelings and potentially clinical depression. And then the depression can also make for physical pain in your body. So it can be very much a loop in on itself where one leads to the other and the other leads back. So, but keep in mind, not everyone with fibromyalgia is clinically depressed, and depression does not cause fibromyalgia, as far as we know. But the physical pain can make the depression worse, that downward spiral we were just talking about. So, because being in pain itself can be very depressing. So just getting into the studies, like what researchers have found to be the connection. About 90% of fibro patients suffers from some type of depressive symptoms. And let's see, 62 to 86% of fibro patients meet the criteria for clinical depression or major depressive disorder. So this is 3 times higher than in the general population, which I think is very significant. And there's additional studies that are showing there might be some type of alteration in brain chemistry in people with fibromyalgia that makes us more susceptible to depression. So what do you think? Have you experienced this cycle of depression, this pain, then depression, then more pain with fibromyalgia? We can jump to the next one. But I don't want to be just a downer today. There is hope. One silver lining, as we put it, is neuronal plasticity. So neuroplasticity. There are lots of options for essentially training your brain and hopefully finding the right treatment that can reconfigure some of those thoughts and feelings in order to help regain a more healthy sense of self and ability to move in the world. So there is possibility to recover, and it can be very hard. I put in the article too that when I was deeper in depression, when I was younger, I was diagnosed with fibro pretty young, and the depression came soon after. And when I was diagnosed and in the thick of the depression that just wouldn't lift when I was still a teenager, it was very difficult to imagine living another 60, 70 years feeling this way, because it's extremely hard to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I really wish that someone had told me back then. So that's why I'm doing this video, is because I really wish someone had told me back then that there was the potential to not feel this way all of the time. I think that would have made a big difference on even how depressed I felt, because just knowing that I would feel this way made me more depressed. So I'm hoping that, now there's a lot more information than there was back then. So I'm hoping that some of this will help ease the suffering people are feeling from that depression, because I remember how awful it was at the time. Oh no, not yet. I'm just talking to Tyler. He's running the slideshow, and he's the one who did the really nice border around everything, and great. So there are lots, just getting quickly into the therapeutic options. There's medications, supplements, talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. We talk a little bit more about some specifics that people have tried in the article. So again, if you go to our website, fibropulse.com, and check out the blog post that has a little bit more detail about the treatments and more specifics. So just putting it to you, you tell me, what have you found helps with depressive feelings, and potentially lifting the feelings of clinical depression, because as I said in the article, I needed my journey was decently long, and I tried a lot of things along the way. And in looking back, I have, opinions on what worked and what didn't. So I did find that even though I don't love taking prescription medications, I do feel like the antidepressants that eventually I found worked for me did help, and helped in a lasting way. So what have you found helps when it comes to depression with fibromyalgia? All right, let's go to the next one. Where did I go? Okay. All right, so just remembering that generally clinical depression is not cured overnight. It's not like one day you're in this state of depression and then the next day you feel 100%. It's slow and incremental, which can be frustrating, and it can be difficult sometimes to tell if you're progressing or not. But again, there are steps you can take, and there is hope for feeling better. So, but even once you've recovered, like those neural pathways are there, and if you're clinically depressed for a long time, those neural pathways become really defined. And I feel myself, even still today, sometimes I can feel those thought patterns and those feelings slipping back. And now I'm able to recognize them more and, step away from it, or go, oh, I'm getting that way. Just breathe. I have some coping mechanisms, and it doesn't overwhelm me the way it did in the past. But those neural pathways are strong, and it takes time to rewrite them. And even once you do, there's still some of that there. Because what can make it particularly difficult, what happens sometimes, even to me now, is a little bit of spiraling. So, we were talking about the pain causes depression, and the depression causes more pain. I'd also say that's true with isolation when it comes to fibromyalgia and depression, that you feel depressed, so maybe you don't feel as much like going out, or you don't want to like go out with a group of friends and bring the mood down or something like that. So you decide to stay in, but then potentially you start losing some of those social and familial connections, or people don't contact you or reach out to you as much. And so then that isolation also leads to potentially more depressive feelings. So I just wanted to mention we're planning on talking about that more next week, getting into some of the feelings of isolation and the social difficulties that can come from having chronic pain and a chronic illness, and what we can do to navigate those things so that maybe we don't feel quite so isolated. And so we're planning to talk about that next week, talking about the isolation and effects on your family and social life. Next week is December 16th. So we're doing it just in time for the holiday season. So hopefully some of those tips might be useful for if you have a lot more social and family gatherings in the near future. All right, and just to recap, you can go to the next one. Yeah, we'll talk more about everything, but just to recap what I talked about. So, oh yeah, you can go full, that's fine. So just to recap, there's a difference between clinical depression and depressive feelings. So the clinical depression is longer lasting and not fleeting. It sticks with you and hangs over you. And so there are particular things you can do to help with that specifically. And for many reasons, not all completely known yet, people with fibro are more likely to struggle with depression And there's a huge, as we talked about, a huge overlap in symptoms. So just understanding that you're not alone. There's a lot of us who've gone through this, and there's information for treatments and options that can help. So there's many avenues when it comes to treatment for depression, and we a lot of us fibro folks, people who've been diagnosed quite some time ago, we've tried a bunch of them. So the great thing with the internet, with something like this, is we can talk about what works, or what worked for us and what didn't work and why, and hopefully shorten the suffering for other people who come after us. That's my main goal. Is because I don't want anyone, it's like I wouldn't want my worst enemy to have to go through, not that I have enemies, but I don't think, wouldn't want my worst enemy to go through the suffering that I did. So it's like anything we can do to help other people not to go through that is worth the time and effort. And again, remembering, like, don't beat yourself up. Like, this is not an instant thing. It's a long journey. It takes time to reprogram your brain to feel better, to think in different ways, and to change the neural pathways and the chemistry to hopefully balance it out to feel better, so that your days aren't as difficult. Yeah, so that was the main things I had to say. I can't see everything all at the same time. Oh, I did that wrong. All right. All right. So again, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching live, that's excellent. We're just starting this out. This is just our second live session. We're still feeling out what works, what people respond to, what people like. So let us know, either in the comments, or you can message us directly. Let us know what would be most helpful. Are these live discussions useful? And potentially we might be able to have a little bit more engagement in the future once we get the hang of things. So, oh yeah, at the moment we're intending for the future, for the foreseeable future, to do these every Sunday it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. And also we're going to be posting this and all the playbacks as videos. So next week we'll be posting this as a video, or so that you can watch it in the future. And same thing for all the future ones. We'll have playbacks of each one. But we'd really love to have you here live with us, so that we can have a discussion, answer your questions, have a chat about it. Yeah. So this has been really great. Thank you so much for being here, and we hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.